The massive black ships moved through space like silent predators hunting their prey. Each vessel stretched for miles, their dark holes reflecting no light from the distant stars. Inside the largest ship, Commander Vextel stood before a wall of glowing screens that showed the small blue planet ahead. Earth looked so peaceful from this distance, spinning slowly in the darkness like a marble lost in an endless black ocean. "Sir, we have completed our analysis of the human military," reported his tactical officer, a tall creature with 4 arms and silver skin. "Their weapons are very basic. Their largest warships would not even count as small support ships in our fleet." Vextel nodded slowly. This was expected. In 300 years of conquest, the Zephyrian hegemony had crushed the armies of dozens of worlds. 6 different alien species worked together under his command, and they had never met a force they could not defeat. Earth would be just another easy victory to add to their long list. On the surface of Earth, Captain Li Jun sat alone in what used to be the busy Seoul Military Command Center. The building was almost empty now. Most of the staff had gone home to be with their families after the world governments announced their surrender. Through the large windows, he could see the city below. People walked the streets slowly, looking up at the sky where small dots of light showed the alien fleet getting closer. The surrender had come quickly. The aliens had proven their power by destroying Mars in seconds. The red planet's defense stations had simply vanished in bright flashes of light. After seeing that display of force, Earth's leaders knew they could not win a direct fight. Logic said they should give up before more people died. But something strange was happening in the military communications that Li Jun monitored. Soldiers around the world were not following the surrender orders. In hidden bases and remote outposts, men and women in uniform were preparing to fight anyway. Their radio messages were filled with talk of old battles and famous last stands. "Delta Squadron reports they are moving to defensive positions," his radio operator, Sergeant Park High, announced from across the room. "They say they will hold until the end." "The end of what?" Li Jun asked quietly. "They did not say, sir. But they mentioned the Battle of Myeongyang and the Alamo, and something about going down fighting. High above Earth, the hegemony's intelligence. Computers were trying to understand these same strange human communications. The aliens had perfect translation machines that could decode any language in seconds. But they were confused by certain human words and phrases that kept appearing in the military chatter. "Commander," the intelligence officer reported to Vextel, "the humans keep using a word that our computers cannot properly classify. They call things impossible, even when discussing real historical events." Vextel looked at the data on his screen. The word impossible appeared in their databases as a curiosity from primitive species. It was supposed to mean something that could not happen or be done. But the humans seemed to use it differently. They talked about impossible battles, where small armies fought much larger ones. They mentioned impossible journeys across dangerous lands. They spoke of impossible victories against overwhelming odds. These humans reference mathematical impossibilities as if they were normal military tactics. The intelligence officer continued, "They have records of battles where they fought with no chance of winning, but they fought anyway." This made no sense to Vextel. His species, like all the others in the hegemony, believed in logic and mathematics. When the numbers showed that victory was impossible, intelligent beings surrendered. It was the rational thing to do. Fighting a battle you could not win was wasteful and pointless. "Ignore their primitive thinking," Vextel ordered. "Prepare for standard occupation procedures. The humans will surrender completely within 3 days." But as his fleet moved closer to Earth, more strange reports came in. Human military units that should have disbanded were instead moving to defensive positions. Civilian populations were evacuating in patterns that made no tactical sense. Instead of fleeing to safety, they seemed to be organizing for resistance. "Sir," the tactical officer reported with obvious confusion, "we are detecting military activity at sites that our computers marked as hopeless to defend. Why would they position forces at locations with zero strategic value? Vextel studied the tactical display. The humans were indeed placing soldiers and weapons in places that could be easily destroyed. Mountains passes that could be bypassed. Islands that could be bombed from orbit. Cities that offered no real protection against advanced alien technology. Perhaps they do not understand the futility of their situation, he suggested. But deep in his mind, a small doubt began to grow. In 3 centuries of conquest, no species had ever behaved like this. When faced with superior force, intelligent beings calculated their chances and surrendered when defeat was certain. It was logical. It was rational. It was how civilized creatures acted. The humans seemed to be doing something else entirely. They were acting as if the word impossible meant something different to them, as if it was not a reason to stop, but a reason to try harder. As Earth grew larger in the view screen, Commander Vextel wondered if his perfect military machine was about to encounter something it had never faced before, an enemy that refused to accept mathematical reality. The first hegemony dropships landed on Earth like falling stars, their massive hulls crushing buildings and trees as they touched down in major cities around the world. Commander Vextel expected to see white flags and surrender delegations within hours. Instead, his communication officers reported something that made no sense. "Sir, we are receiving weapons fire from multiple locations," reported the tactical officer, his forearms moving quickly across the control panels. "The humans are attacking our landing sites." Vextel stared at the battle reports flowing across his screens. Small groups of human soldiers were shooting at his massive war machines with primitive rifles and rockets. It was like watching insects attack elephants. The humans could not possibly win these fights, yet they kept fighting anyway. "Have they not calculated their chances of survival?" he asked. "Our analysis shows they must understand the futility of their actions," the intelligence officer replied. "But they continue to engage our forces, despite mathematical certainty of defeat." In the ruins of Busan, Captain Lee Jun crawled through the broken concrete and twisted metal that used to be the city center. 3 alien dropships had landed here, each one the size of a city block. They disgorged thousands of hegemony soldiers in advanced armor that could stop any human weapon. Yet Lee Jun and his small team were still fighting. "Sergeant Park, what is our ammunition status?" he whispered into his radio. "Running low, sir," came the reply from Sergeant Park High, who was positioned on a rooftop 2 blocks away. "But I have been monitoring alien communications. They seem confused by our actions." Lee Jun smiled grimly as he watched another squad of human soldiers charge an alien position. They would lose, just as every other squad had lost. But something strange was happening to the aliens. They were moving more slowly now, looking around nervously instead of advancing with their usual confidence. "They do not understand us," Lee Jun said into his radio. "They think we should have surrendered by now." "Maybe we should have," Park High replied. "The mathematics are clear, sir. We cannot win." "Since when do humans care about mathematics?" Lee Jun asked, remembering the old stories his grandfather had told him about the Korean War, about impossible battles won through determination alone. Aboard the command ship, Vextel was receiving reports that troubled him deeply. His forces were winning every engagement, destroying human positions with ease. But the humans kept fighting. Worse, they seemed to be inspiring each other with stories from their history. "Commander, we have intercepted more human communications," the intelligence officer announced. "They are sharing accounts of something they call the Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 soldiers held off an army of 1 million. "That is clearly fictional," Vextel replied. "No, sir, our historical databases confirm it happened." Also something called the Warsaw Uprising, where humans fought for months against impossible odds, and the Siege of the Alamo, where 200 defenders held off 4,000 attackers. Vextol felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. These historical battles made no logical sense. Why would small forces fight much larger ones when defeat was certain? Why would intelligent beings choose death over the rational option of surrender? "Sir," the tactical officer interrupted, "we have a problem. Major Kim Tae and a small human team have launched from Earth's surface in a damaged transport ship. They appear to be on a collision course with our fleet." Vextol looked at the display showing the tiny human vessel approaching his massive armada. One small ship against our entire fleet. What is their tactical objective? Unknown, sir. Our computers calculate a 0.0003% chance of the humans accomplishing anything meaningful against our defenses. Then ignore them, Vextol ordered. Focus on the ground operations. But something about the approaching ship bothered him. The humans inside must know they were flying to their deaths. Their small transport could not possibly damage even one of his warships. Yet they came anyway, broadcasting the same strange word that kept appearing in human communications: impossible. On the surface, the pattern of human resistance was becoming clear to Vextol's analysts. The humans were not trying to win individual battles. They were doing something else entirely. Every hopeless fight seemed to inspire 10 more. Every impossible last stand became a story that spread to other human units, making them fight harder. "Sir," the intelligence officer reported. With obvious confusion, human resistance is actually increasing as they suffer more defeats. This contradicts all our psychological warfare models. "Explain," Vextol demanded. "When we destroy a human position, the survivors do not retreat or surrender. Instead, they seem to become more determined. They share stories of their fallen comrades and speak of avenging them. Each defeat makes them fight harder, not surrender faster." Vextol's logical mind struggled to process this information. In every other conquest, destroying the enemy's forces led to decreased resistance and eventual surrender. The humans seemed to operate by completely different rules. "They keep using that word, Commander," the intelligence officer continued. "Impossible. But they do not use it the way our translators expected. When they say something is impossible, they do not mean it cannot be done. They seem to mean it will be difficult, but worth attempting anyway." As Major Kim Tae's transport ship drew closer to the hegemony fleet, Vextol realized he was facing something his 3 centuries of military experience had never prepared him for. An enemy that treated mathematical impossibility not as a barrier, but as a challenge. The word that meant nothing to them was becoming everything to the humans. Major Kim Tae gripped the controls of his damaged transport ship as it approached the massive alien fleet. Behind him, his foreman team checked their weapons one final time. Private Nam-soo, barely 20 years old, looked pale but determined. Corporal Oh-min studied the stolen alien ship blueprints they had downloaded from a crashed hegemony scout vessel. Sergeant Choi Jun and Private Bae-ho prepared the makeshift explosive devices they had built from salvaged parts. "Sir, they are scanning us," Nam-soo reported from the communications station. "Should we try to avoid their sensors?" "No," Kim Tae replied calmly. "Let them see us coming. They will think we are just another desperate suicide attack." The hegemony fleet stretched before them like a metal city floating in space. Hundreds of massive warships arranged in perfect formations. Their weapons pointed toward Earth. The largest ship, the Dominion's Edge, sat in the center like a black mountain made of steel and alien technology. Aboard the command ship, Vextol watched the small human vessel approach on his tactical display. "Status report on the incoming transport," he ordered. "Single ship, minimal armament, carrying approximately 5 humans," his tactical officer replied. "No significant threat detected. Should we destroy them?" Vextol considered this. The ship was so small and weak that destroying it would waste more energy than ignoring it. Let them come. When they realize they cannot damage our shields, They will turn back or crash harmlessly against our hull. But Major Kim Tae had no intention of crashing into the alien shields. As his ship entered the fleet's defensive perimeter, he executed a maneuver that the hegemony computers had labeled impossible. He detonated his own ship's engines while still inside the transport. The explosion should have killed everyone aboard instantly. Instead, Kim Tae had calculated the blast timing perfectly. The explosion destroyed the ship's outer hull and sent debris flying in all directions. But the interior compartment, where his team waited, survived just long enough. As wreckage scattered across space, the 5 humans used personal jetpacks to hide among the floating metal pieces. "Sir, the human ship has been destroyed," the tactical officer reported to Vextel. "As expected. Continue monitoring Earth's surface." But the hegemony's sensors, designed to track large ships and energy weapons, were not programmed to detect individual humans floating in space debris. Kim Tae and his team drifted closer to the command ship, invisible among the scattered wreckage of their own vessel. "Phase 1 complete," Kim Tae whispered into his helmet radio. "Prepare for boarding action." Private Nam Soo had studied electrical engineering before joining the military. As they reached the Dominion's edge, he used a modified welding torch to cut through the ship's outer hull. The aliens had not expected anyone to survive the transport's destruction, so this section of their ship had minimal security sensors. Inside the command ship, alarms suddenly began sounding in the lower decks. "Report," Vextel demanded. "Unknown energy signature detected in Section 12, came the reply. "Investigating now?" But by the time hegemony security forces reached Section 12, the humans were already gone. Corporal Oh-min had used the stolen blueprints to navigate through maintenance tunnels that the aliens rarely checked. The 5 humans moved through the massive ship like ghosts, avoiding patrols and security cameras. How did they get inside? Vextel asked his security chief as more alarms sounded throughout the ship. "Unknown, Commander. Our external sensors show no breach in the hull integrity." "Then how are they here?" The security chief had no answer. The hegemony's logical minds could not understand how the humans had survived their ship's destruction, passed through the fleet's defenses, and entered the command vessel without triggering any security systems. Kim Tae led his team deeper into the ship, following Omen's directions toward the central computer core. They moved quickly, but carefully, knowing that discovery meant certain death. Behind them, they could hear alien security forces searching deck by deck, growing closer with each passing minute. "Sir, I can access their internal communication system from here," Nam Soo reported when they reached a junction box in the ship's main corridor. "Do it," Kim Tae ordered. "Upload everything we brought." Nam Soo connected his portable computer to the alien system and began transferring data. But this was not a virus designed to destroy their computers. Instead, it contained something far more dangerous to the hegemony's logical minds: the complete military history of humanity, every impossible battle humanity had ever fought, every hopeless last stand that had somehow become a victory, every time humans had looked at mathematical certainty and decided to fight anyway. The data flowed into the hegemony's network like poison spreading through their perfect system of logic and calculation. "Upload complete," Sir Nam Soo reported. At that moment, hegemony's security forces rounded the corner and opened fire. Sergeant Choi Jun and Private Baeho threw themselves in front of their teammates, their bodies absorbing the alien energy weapons. They died instantly, but their sacrifice gave the others precious seconds to escape. "2 men down," Kim Tae reported, grimly as he, Nam Soo, and Oh-min ran through the ship's corridors. Behind them, more security forces were closing in from all directions. Throughout the hegemony fleet, computer systems began processing the uploaded human history. Military analysts stared at their screens in confusion as impossible victories appeared in their databases, each one verified and authenticated. The logical foundation of their perfect war machine began to crack as they encountered an enemy that had built their entire military tradition on doing the impossible. The data flowed through the hegemony's computer networks like water through cracks in a dam. Every ship in the fleet received the same information at the same time, thousands of years of human military history, complete with battle records, casualty reports, and tactical analyses, but these were not normal military records. They were accounts of battles that should never have been fought, victories that should never have happened, and triumphs that defied every law of mathematics and logic. Commander Vextel stood in his command center, watching his officers struggle to understand what their computers were showing them. His science officer, a brilliant creature with 3 brains, looked up from her workstation with visible confusion. "Commander, these human historical records show mathematical impossibilities," she reported. "At a place called Thermopylae, 300. Human warriors held off 200,000 enemy soldiers for 3 days. The probability calculations show this could not happen." "Obviously the records are false," Vextel replied. "No rational species would attempt such a hopeless battle." "Sir, I have cross-referenced the data with genetic databases and archaeological evidence," the science officer continued. "The battles are real. Every impossible victory in these records actually happened." Vextel felt something cold growing in his chest. For 300 years, the hegemony had conquered worlds by proving to their enemies that resistance was mathematically futile. When faced with overwhelming odds, intelligent species surrendered. It was logical, it was rational, it was how the universe was supposed to work. But these human records showed something different. They showed a species that looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. "Display the Battle of Myonyang," he ordered. The holographic display showed a naval battle from Earth's ancient history. Admiral Yi Sun-sin had faced 333 enemy ships, with only 13 of his own vessels. By every calculation, he should have retreated, or surrendered. Instead, he had attacked. And somehow, impossibly, he had won. "How is this possible?" Vexto asked. The human admiral used the tidal currents and narrow straits to limit how many enemy ships could attack him at once. The tactical officer explained. But even accounting for terrain advantages, the victory probability was less than 1%. "Yet he tried anyway," Vextel said quietly. More reports flooded in from across the fleet. The Warsaw Uprising, where 40,000 poorly armed humans fought, 50,000 well-equipped soldiers for 63 days. The Alamo, where 200 defenders held off 4,000 attackers until the very end. The Siege of Bastogne, where surrounded American soldiers replied to surrender demands with a single word: nuts. Deep in the bowels of the Dominion's edge, Major Kim Tae crept through the maintenance tunnels with his 2 remaining men. Private Nam Su had been killed by security forces 10 minutes ago, dying while covering their escape. Now only Kim Tae and Corporal Oh Min remained, carrying their simple weapons toward the ship's bridge. "Sir, we are completely surrounded," Oh Min whispered. "There are security teams on every deck between us and the command center." Kim Tae checked his ammunition. 3 clips left for his rifle, 2 grenades, and a knife. Against a ship carrying 10,000 alien soldiers with advanced technology, it was nothing. By every logical measure, they should surrender now and hope for mercy. Instead, Kim Tae smiled. "Remember what my grandfather used to say about the Korean War. When the Chinese surrounded them at Chosin Reservoir, the American Marines did not call it being surrounded. They called it being able to attack in any direction." "Sir, that is not logical," Oh Min replied. "Since when do humans care about logic?" Kim Tae asked. Throughout the hegemony fleet, something unprecedented was happening. Military commanders who had never experienced doubt began second-guessing their tactical assessments. Computer systems designed for perfect logical analysis started generating error messages when calculating human behavior. Soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds began hesitating before advancing against human positions. "Commander, The intelligence officer reported to Vexthal. Our ground forces are reporting decreased combat effectiveness. Unit commanders are requesting additional probability assessments before engaging human resistance. Why? Vexthal demanded. They are concerned that the humans may attempt tactically impossible maneuvers, sir. Our soldiers are spending too much time calculating unlikely scenarios instead of executing standard procedures. Vexthal realized with growing horror that the human virus was not destroying their computers. It was doing something worse. It was making his perfect military machine think like humans. His logical, mathematical warriors were beginning to consider impossible possibilities. On Earth's surface, the effects were immediate and dramatic. Hegemony forces that had been advancing steadily began slowing down, then stopping entirely. Alien commanders who should have been pressing their overwhelming advantages instead found themselves planning for human tactics that made no mathematical sense. Captain Lee, June, still fighting in the ruins of Busan, noticed the change immediately. Sergeant Park, the aliens are not advancing as quickly as before. They seem to be waiting for something. What are they waiting for, sir? Parkai asked. I think they are trying to figure out what impossible thing we might do next, Lee Jun replied. Aboard the command ship, Kim Tae reached the final corridor leading to the bridge. Ahead of him, he could see the massive doors that protected the hegemony's supreme commander. Between him and those doors stood 200 elite alien guards with weapons that could vaporize him instantly. He was wounded, alone except for Oh-min, and facing odds that no rational person would accept. By every measurement of logic and mathematics, he should surrender immediately. Instead, he checked his rifle one more time and whispered the word that had been driving the aliens insane with confusion: impossible. Then he stepped around the corner to face an army alone. The massive bridge doors of the Dominion's edge slid open with a sound like thunder. Major Kim Tae stepped through the entrance, his rifle raised, blood dripping from wounds on his arms and chest. Behind him, Corporal Oh-min lay dead in the corridor, having sacrificed himself to give his commander these final moments. The bridge stretched before them like a cathedral of war. Hundreds of alien officers from 6 different species stood at their stations, their advanced weapons trained on the single human who had somehow fought his way to the heart of their fleet. At the center of it all, Commander Vexthal rose from his command chair, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of disbelief. Impossible, Vexthal said, the human word sounding strange in his alien voice. You should be dead. Your ship was destroyed. Your team was eliminated. Our security forces outnumber you 1,000 to 1. Kim Tae kept his rifle pointed at the alien commander, though his hands shook from exhaustion and blood loss. You keep using that word, he said quietly. I do not think it means what you think it means. Around the bridge, alien officers stared at their tactical displays in confusion. The human histories they had been forced to study were playing out before their eyes. One soldier against impossible odds, refusing to surrender, even when logic demanded it. Human Vexthal continued, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of conquest. You have accomplished the tactically impossible in reaching this location, but mathematical reality remains unchanged. You face certain defeat. Logic demands surrender. Kim Tae thought about his grandfather, who had fought in the Korean War when American and South Korean forces were pushed back to a tiny area around Busan. Everyone said they would be driven into the sea. Everyone said resistance was hopeless. Everyone said it was impossible to win, but they had fought anyway. And somehow, impossibly, they had won. You want to know what impossible means to humans? Kim Tae asked, blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. It does not mean something cannot be done. It means something has not been done yet. He pulled the trigger. The battle that followed lasted only seconds, but those seconds changed everything. Kim Tae's primitive rifle could not penetrate the aliens' advanced armor, but it did not matter. What mattered was that he had tried. What mattered was that he had stood alone against an entire army and refused to accept defeat. As alien energy weapons ended his life, Kim Tae fell with a smile on his face. He had done the impossible one last time, but something extraordinary was happening. Throughout the hegemony fleet, the sight of one human facing 1,000 enemies had broken something fundamental in their logical minds. Computer systems that had never experienced uncertainty began shutting down. Military commanders who had conquered dozens of worlds stood, frozen, unable to process what they had witnessed. Analysis, Vextel demanded, staring at the human's body. He knew he could not win, the tactical officer reported with obvious confusion. Our computers show he calculated a 0% probability of survival before entering this bridge. Then why did he come? No one could answer. The alien minds, built for logic and mathematics, could not understand an enemy that treated certain death not as a reason to stop, but as a reason to try. On Earth's surface, the impossible was happening everywhere. Human resistance fighters who should have been crushed were somehow holding their positions. Alien forces that should have been advancing were instead retreating in confusion. The hegemony's perfect war machine was breaking down because it could not calculate how to fight an enemy that refused to accept mathematical reality. Captain Lee Jun received the news through his radio as he fought in the ruins of Seoul. All units, this is command. The alien fleet is withdrawing from Earth orbit. Repeat, the enemy is retreating. How is that possible, sir? Sergeant Park High asked. We were losing every battle. Lee Jun looked up at the sky, where the alien ships were indeed pulling back, their perfect formations dissolving into chaos as commanders struggled to understand what had happened. We were losing every battle, he agreed. But we were winning something more important. We were showing them that losing does not mean giving up. Aboard the Dominion's Edge, Vextel stared at his tactical displays as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The virus of human military history had spread beyond his fleet. On conquered worlds, alien commanders were beginning to question their own tactics. Soldiers who had never failed were now afraid to engage enemies who might do the impossible. Commander, his intelligence officer reported with something approaching panic. Our entire military doctrine is based on the assumption that intelligent enemies will surrender when faced with certain defeat. But humans do not surrender. They fight harder when the odds get worse. Vextel realized the terrible truth. For 300 years, the hegemony had conquered worlds by proving that resistance was mathematically futile. But humans had just proven that mathematics was not everything. They had shown that sometimes, the word impossible was not a barrier but a challenge. Withdraw the fleet, Vextel ordered quietly. Sir, withdraw the fleet. We cannot defeat an enemy that makes impossible victories routine. As the hegemony ships disappeared into hyperspace, Earth's defenders gathered in the ruins of their cities. They had lost most of their battles, but they had won the war by refusing to accept that winning was impossible. The word had finally found its true meaning.